The blizzard screamed through the mountains, and Elara knew she'd die tonight. For 8 years since her exile, she'd survived in the northern wilderness where others couldn't. The cold never bothered her the way it should, but this storm was different. This was a widowmaker, and she had no shelter. Blamed for a harsh winter at 16, cast out as winter's curse because of her frost-white hair and ice-blue eyes, she'd accepted her fate as the outcast who'd die alone in the cold. Then she heard it, a weak cry cutting through the wind. A wolf cub, pure white, royal bloodline, abandoned or separated in the storm. He was freezing to death. Every survival instinct screamed to save herself, to find shelter. But she'd spent 8 years frozen and alone. At least now she could freeze with purpose. Elara wrapped her body around the tiny cub, using herself as a shield against the deadly cold, and whispered, "I've got you, little one. You're not dying alone tonight." As the temperature plummeted and snow buried them both, something ancient stirred in her blood. Winter's embrace, awakening for the first time in centuries. Elara wrapped herself around the cub as the wind turned vicious, each gust slicing through her threadbare clothes like frozen blades. Snow fell so thick she couldn't see beyond her own shaking hands. She pulled the tiny wolf closer against her chest, tucking his trembling body beneath her chin, and felt the violent hammering of his too-fast heartbeat. "Shush," she whispered, though her voice was already raw. "I've got you. You're not alone." The temperature plummeted. She felt it in her bones first, that deep, marrow-level cold that meant death was coming. Her fingers went numb within minutes. The cub whimpered, his small body convulsing with shivers that wouldn't stop. "My parents used to tell me stories," Elara heard herself say, desperate to fill the howling silence. "Before everything changed. They said the northern lights were the moon goddess dancing, celebrating wolves who'd been brave." Her teeth chattered so hard she bit her tongue, tasted copper. "I haven't been brave in 8 years. But maybe tonight I can be." The cub's shivering worsened. She curved tighter around him, giving him every inch of warmth her body could spare. Snow buried them, a suffocating white tomb. She should be colder by now. Should be slipping toward unconsciousness. Instead, something was shifting inside her, not pain exactly, but awareness spreading through her limbs like cracks forming in ice. Her body was moving heat in ways that defied nature. The cub pressed against her heart grew warmer. Impossibly, gradually warmer. And Elara grew colder. Her pulse slowed from frantic to sluggish. Ice crystals formed along her eyelashes, in the corners of her mouth. She felt them spreading through her blood, tiny frozen daggers multiplying with each labored breath. Winter's embrace, something ancient whispered in her mind. The sacred gift. The sacrifice. Her lips turned blue, then gray. She couldn't feel her legs anymore, couldn't feel anything below her waist. But the cub's breathing was evening out, his shivers subsiding. She was giving him her life force, trading her warmth for his survival, and some primal part of her understood this was what she'd been meant for all along. "You're going to be fine," she slurred, barely conscious now. Her heartbeat was so slow she could count the seconds between each thud. "Someone will find you. Someone who matters. Someone who'll..." Her words dissolved into frost. The cub nuzzled weakly against her neck. Through failing vision, Elara saw her hands glowing with a pale silver light, the same color as fresh snow under starlight. Beautiful. Deadly. The gift fully awakened now, pouring everything she had into this tiny creature who deserved to live more than she'd ever deserved anything. 8 years of being called a curse, she thought, vision fading to white. And maybe I finally did something that mattered. Maybe I'm not death. Maybe I'm just cold. The distinction felt important, even as consciousness slipped away. She wasn't the bringer of winter. She was simply a girl who'd survived it long enough to shield someone else from its teeth. Somewhere in the distance, or maybe inside her own failing mind, she heard howling. Deep, powerful voices calling through the storm. But the world was already disappearing into frost and silence, and the strange peace of knowing she'd chosen how her story ended. The cub was warm. That was all that mattered. The blizzard raged on, but Elara didn't feel it anymore. She'd become winter itself, frozen, still, and finally purposeful. Dawn broke gray and merciless over the mountains. Theron had been running for 4 hours straight, his wolf form pushing through snowdrifts that would have buried lesser animals. His royal guard flanked him, grim-faced and silent, because they all knew what they expected to find. His son, 3 years old, lost in a widowmaker storm. Dead. The word echoed with each pounding step. Theron had tracked Asher sent through the blizzard's aftermath, following the faint trail left before the avalanche had swept his traveling party apart. He'd howled until his throat bled, searched until his paws cracked and bled, prayed to gods he'd stopped believing in after his mate died in childbirth. At the base of an ancient pine, he found a mound of snow that didn't belong. His wolves descended on it, digging with frantic urgency. Within seconds, they uncovered silver-white hair. Then a face pale as death, lips the gray-blue of a corpse, frost coating delicate eyelashes like diamonds. A woman, frozen nearly solid, her body curved in a protective arc around something she clutched to her chest. Theron shifted to human form, falling to his knees. Cradled against her heart, wrapped in the shelter of her dying warmth, was Asher. Pink-cheeked, breathing, alive. The mate bond struck Theron like a physical blow, a recognition so violent and absolute it drove the air from his lungs. Mine, mate, mine. Every instinct in his body screamed the word, howled it, demanded he claim what belonged to him. This impossible woman had saved his son by sacrificing herself. He touched her hands, still curved protectively around Asher, and saw the faint shimmer of silver light clinging to her fingertips. Magic older than memory. His breath caught. "Winter's embrace," he whispered. "She is Winter's embrace. The sacred gift. Lost for 300 years. This woman was a relic, a legend made flesh, and she'd used the ancient magic to pour her life into his child." Theron lifted her with infinite care, terrified she might shatter like ice. She weighed almost nothing, her body rigid with cold that shouldn't be survivable. He could barely detect a heartbeat, one faint thud every 10 seconds, slow enough to count. "You're not dying today," he vowed, voice breaking. "You saved my son. Now I save you." His head healer, Vera, appeared at his shoulder, took one look at the woman, and her expression went dark. "Your Majesty," her core temperature. "I don't care." Theron's wolf snarled behind his eyes. "Bring her back. There may be nothing to bring back. She is Winter's embrace. She survived this long." He pulled the woman closer, sharing what little warmth his body could offer. "You will save her. That's an order." Asher stirred in his other arm, blinking awake with the slow confusion of a child pulled from deep sleep. His gaze found the frozen woman, and his small face crumpled. He reached out with chubby fingers, patting her frost-covered cheek. "Mama cold," he whimpered, voice thick with tears. "Help Mama. She saved me. She was warm and then cold, and his words dissolved into sobs. "Help, Mama." Theron's heart cracked clean through. His son hadn't spoken more than a handful of words since losing his birth mother. Now he was calling this stranger Mama, already bonded to the woman who'd chosen death to keep him alive. "We will," Theron promised, meeting Vera's doubtful eyes with absolute conviction. "We're taking her home. And she's going to live." Even if he had to fight death itself to make it true. 5 days Elara lingered between worlds, not quite alive, not quite dead. Theron refused to leave her side. He wrapped heated stones in cloth and pressed them against her limbs. Shared his body heat through the endless nights, holding her frozen form against his chest until his own core temperature dropped dangerously low. His healers worked in shifts, pouring warming potions down her throat, monitoring the impossibly slow crawl of her pulse. Her sparse belongings told a story that made his wolf howl with rage. A worn travel pack, a water skin, a single change of clothes, and tucked in the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, identification papers from the Silver Pine pack. Elara, 24 years old. Omega. Exiled. Theron sent for the records. What came back made him want to rip throats. Blamed for unseasonable winter. Crop failures. Livestock deaths. Accused of being cursed. Voted out by pack council. Age, 16. They'd cast out a child for weather patterns she couldn't control. Condemned her to 8 years of wandering alone in the harshest territories of the North. And she'd survived. More than survived, she'd awakened a sacred gift and used it to save a stranger's son. On the 5th day, her eyelids fluttered. Theron was at her side instantly, one hand pressed to hers, still cold, but no longer the deathly chill of ice. "Easy. You're safe." Her eyes opened slowly, revealing irises the pale blue of winter sky. Confusion clouded them, then awareness. Her first sensation seemed to overwhelm her. She gasped softly, tears welling. "Warm," she whispered, voice cracked and wondering. "I'm warm." It broke something in Theron's chest. 8 years. 8 years since she'd felt safe enough, sheltered enough to be warm. Her gaze darted around the room, frantic now. "The cub? The white cub, is he here?" Theron gestured to the small bed beside hers where Asher slept, curled on his side with his small hand stretched across the gap to hold hers even in sleep. "You saved him. He's fine. Perfect." Elara stared at their joined hands, at Asher's peaceful face, and her expression shattered into something between relief and anguish. "I'm dead, aren't I? This has to be the afterlife. I don't get warm. I don't get," her voice broke. "People don't save me. You're not dead." Theron kept his voice gentle despite the fury still burning in his gut at what she'd endured. "You're in the Frostborn Fortress. I'm Alpha King Theron. The cub you saved is my son Asher, heir to my territories." He paused, then said what she needed to hear. "You used Winter's embrace, a gift we thought lost for 3 centuries. You're the first bearer in living memory." She shook her head weakly, trying to pull her hand from Asher's. "No, I'm not special. I'm cursed. I bring cold and death wherever I go. It's why they exiled me. It's why You're my true mate." The words hung in the air between them. Elara went utterly still, her face draining of what little color had returned. "No." The word came out broken, desperate. "No, that's not possible. You don't understand. I'm cursed. Everything I touch freezes and dies. You need to send me away before I hurt him, before I hurt you. I'll bring winter to your territories. I'll destroy. You didn't freeze my son. Theron's voice cut through her panic, firm and absolute. You saved him. You gave him your warmth, your life. Look at him, Elara. Does he look harmed? She looked. Asher was pink-cheeked and peaceful, healthy and whole. You're not a curse, Theron said quietly. You're a blessing we don't deserve. The fortress healers declared Elara physically recovered within 2 weeks. Emotionally, she remained frozen in ways that had nothing to do with temperature. Theron brought scholars, dusty old wolves who spent their lives buried in ancient texts. They arrived with scrolls and books that smelled of age and knowledge, spreading them across the library table where Elara sat rigid with anxiety. Winter's embrace, the eldest scholar explained, her weathered hands reverent on a crumbling manuscript, is a sacred gift from the winter goddess herself. Bestowed only on protectors, those willing to sacrifice everything to shield others from the cold's cruelty. Elara's fingers twisted in her lap. It killed me. It nearly killed you, the scholar corrected gently. Because you gave without restraint. But the gift itself doesn't kill. It preserves. It protects. You're not a bringer of death, child. You're a guardian of life in winter's domain. My pack said. Your pack was wrong. Theron's voice was hard as iron. They blamed you for things you couldn't control. Weather patterns. Failed crops. Natural hardships they needed someone to punish for. Elara stared at the ancient texts, at illustrations of silver-haired women surrounded by winter light, and felt nothing but the old familiar certainty. She was dangerous. Cursed. Wrong. The scholars could say whatever they wanted. 8 years of exile had taught her the truth. But then there was Asher. The little prince attached himself to her like a burr from the moment she could stand. He followed her through corridors, his small hand always reaching for hers. When she tried to keep distance, he simply waited outside her door with the patient persistence of someone who knew she'd eventually emerge. Story, he'd ask, holding up a picture book with both hands. Asher, I shouldn't. Please? You tell them best. She was terrified every time he touched her. Certain her curse would manifest, that he'd grow cold, that something terrible would happen. But he only ever grew warmer in her presence, his laughter echoing off stone walls as she stumbled through tales of brave wolves and cunning foxes. You're warm now, he told her one evening, pressing his palm to her cheek with the solemnity only a 3-year-old could manage. Not cold like in the snow. I like you warm. Something cracked in Elara's chest. Theron watched it happen, watched her slowly, incrementally soften. She smiled when Asher laughed. Reached for him instinctively when he stumbled. Let him curl against her side during stories, his small body trustful and content. The Alpha King didn't push the mate bond. Never mentioned it after that first day. Instead, he showed her through quiet actions that she was valued. He had meals brought to the library when she lost track of time reading. Left books on winter magic outside her door. Asked her opinion on matters of territory management, then actually listened to her answers. Why? She asked one night when he found her on the fortress walls, staring at the northern lights. Why what? Why are you doing this? I'm nobody. An exile. You're the woman who saved my son. Theron stood beside her, close but not touching, respecting the boundaries she needed. You're intelligent, brave, and stronger than you know. You survived 8 years alone in the harshest territory in the north. You awakened a sacred gift. You sacrificed your life for a child you didn't know. He paused. And you're my mate, whether you accept it or not. I'll hurt you. Eventually, You spent 8 years believing you were a curse. His voice was soft but unyielding. "Let me spend the next 8 showing you you're a blessing." Elara turned to him, tears freezing on her lashes in the cold air. "What if you're wrong? Then we'll figure it out together." Theron finally allowed himself to reach out, tucking a strand of silver hair behind her ear with infinite gentleness. "But I'm not wrong, Elara. And someday you'll believe it too." In the courtyard below, Asher's laughter rang out as he played with the guards' children, his joy uncontained and brilliant. For the first time in 8 years, Elara let herself hope. The winter festival arrived with banners of ice blue and silver, the fortress courtyard transformed into a celebration of the season. Visiting packs from neighboring territories filled the halls, their laughter and music echoing off ancient stone. Elara tried to make herself invisible, staying to the shadows, avoiding eye contact. But shadows couldn't hide silver hair that glowed like fresh snow. The whispers started within hours. She felt them like needle pricks against her skin, sidelong glances, conversations that stopped when she passed, the old familiar fear radiating from strangers who'd heard stories. The cursed Omega. Winter Witch. She'll bring storms and death. A delegation from the Ire Peak pack cornered Theron in the Great Hall, their voices loud enough to carry. "Your Majesty, we question the wisdom of harboring such a volatile element. For the safety of all territories." Elara pressed herself against the far wall, Asher's hand tight in hers. The little prince sensed her tension, looking up with worried eyes. During the formal gathering that evening, an elder from the Silverwood delegation rose, his face hard with righteous conviction. The hall fell silent. "Alpha King Theron," he announced, voice ringing with authority. "We cannot stay silent. This woman," he pointed directly at Elara, "will curse us all. Look at her. Winter itself given flesh. She brought the storm that nearly killed your son. Send her away before she destroys everything you've built." The crowd murmured agreement. Dozens of eyes turned to Elara, filled with the same fear and blame she'd seen 8 years ago. It was happening again. Her breath came short and sharp. Flight instinct screamed through every nerve. She should leave before they forced her out, before the violence started, before. Asher tore free from her grip and ran straight to the elder, his small face fierce with 3-year-old outrage. "No," he shouted, voice high and clear. "She didn't make the storm. She saved me from it." He whirled to face the assembled crowd, arms spread wide. "The bad cold was hurting me and she made me warm. She almost died making me warm. She's not scary, she's nice." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Theron rose from his seat, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop with the weight of his authority. "Enough." The single word cut through the chaos like a blade. He descended from the dais, each step measured and deliberate, until he stood beside Elara. His hand found hers, claiming her publicly before every witness. This woman used Winter's embrace, a sacred gift lost for 3 centuries, to preserve my son's life at the cost of her own. She gave everything to save a child she'd never met. She is the first bearer of the ancient gift in living memory. His voice hardened to steel. "And she is my mate. Anyone who speaks against her speaks against me." The elder paled. "Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect, but—" "Then show respect." Theron's wolf gleamed in his eyes. "Or leave my territories." The challenge hung in the air. The elder bowed stiffly and retreated to his seat. Around the hall, expressions shifted: shame, curiosity, grudging reassessment. Asher climbed into Elara's arms, burying his face against her neck. "You're staying," he whispered fiercely. Right, Dada? She's staying. She's staying, Theron confirmed, his gaze never leaving Elara's stunned face. Later, when the crowd had dispersed and Asher was asleep, Elara found Theron on the walls. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He turned to her, expression solemn. Because it's true. And because you're worth defending. They'll resent you for it. Let them. He stepped closer. You've spent 8 years running from people who blamed you for things beyond your control. I won't be another person who fails to stand up for you when it matters. Elara's throat tightened. I don't know how to. You don't have to know. Just stop expecting me to abandon you. His hand found hers again. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you. For the first time, she believed him. Winter's teeth sank deep into the frost-born territories in the weeks that followed. Temperatures plummeted to levels that threatened even the hardiest wolves. Livestock huddled in barns, shivering despite thick winter coats. The elderly and very young struggled to stay warm despite roaring fires and layers of furs. The healers worked frantically, but there was only so much they could do against cold this severe. Elara stood in the courtyard watching a mother carry her whimpering daughter inside, the child's lips tinged blue despite being wrapped in blankets. Something twisted in her chest, a recognition, a memory of that endless night with Asher when her body had somehow shared warmth that shouldn't have been possible. What if I could do that for them? She found Theron in his study reviewing supply reports, his expression grim. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the weight of responsibility he carried, every life in these territories, depending on his decisions. I want to try something, she said before fear could silence her. Winter's embrace, it doesn't just protect in deadly cold. That night with Asher, I shared warmth. Redistributed it. What if? She swallowed hard. What if I could do that for others? Create zones where the cold isn't so brutal. Theron was on his feet instantly. It could drain you. It might. But people are suffering. Her hands clenched at her sides. Let me try. Please. They started small, a single room in the healer's ward where the most vulnerable children were kept. Elara closed her eyes and reached for that awareness she'd felt in the storm, that sense of warmth and cold as tangible things she could move and shape. The gift answered like it had been waiting. Silver light bloomed from her hands, spreading outward in gentle waves. The brutal cold retreated. Not gone, she couldn't banish winter itself, but softened, tempered, made bearable. The children's shivering eased. Color returned to their cheeks. It's working, the head healer breathed. Elara opened her eyes, swaying slightly. How long will it last? Hours, at least. Maybe longer. Theron steadied her with a hand on her elbow. How do you feel? Tired. But I can do more. She did. For 3 days, Elara moved through the territories creating warm zones, nurseries where infants slept peacefully, shelters where the elderly could rest without shaking, barns where livestock stopped their distressed lowing. Exhausting work that left her drained by evening, but she woke each dawn and started again. People stopped whispering when she passed. They stared instead with wonder and dawning gratitude. On the 4th day, a mother whose infant son had been struggling approached Elara in the market square. The woman's eyes were red from crying, but her expression was radiant. You saved him, she said, voice breaking. The healers said he wouldn't survive another night in that cold. But you made our home warm. He slept through the night. He's eating again. You. She grabbed Elara's hands, tears streaming freely. You're a blessing. A true blessing from the winter goddess herself. Elara stood frozen, unable to process words she'd never expected to hear directed at her. That evening, Theron found her sitting alone in the courtyard, staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. He sat beside her without speaking, just offering his solid presence. "They called me blessed," she whispered finally. "You are. I've been called cursed for so long, I don't know how to." "You're not just surviving winter anymore," Theron said softly, taking her cold hand in his warm one. "You're mastering it, shaping it. You're becoming who you were always meant to be." Elara looked at him, at the fortress where lights glowed warm against the bitter cold, at the territories she'd helped protect. Maybe he was right. Maybe she wasn't a curse after all. Maybe she was finally becoming real. 3 months after arriving at the Frostborn fortress, Elara found herself in the courtyard garden building snow wolves with Asher. Spring was supposed to be coming, but snow still blanketed the ground in pristine white. "Perfect for sculpting. This one's you, Elara," Asher announced, patting a lopsided snow wolf with oversized ears. "See? She's pretty and has magic." "It's beautiful," Elara said, throat tight with affection she was still learning to accept. "Now make a dragon. A big one that breathes ice." They worked together, Asher's mittened hands alongside her bare ones. She didn't feel cold the way she used to, building fantastical creatures that made the little prince shriek with delight. His laughter echoed off stone walls, bright and unrestrained, and Elara realized with startling clarity that she'd memorized that sound. Treasured it. "Dada, look." Asher spotted Theron watching from the colonnade and raced over to drag him closer. "Look what we made." Theron admired each sculpture with appropriate gravity, while Asher provided elaborate backstories. When the child finally ran off to show the guards his ice dragon, Theron settled on the snow-dusted bench beside Elara. "He loves you," Theron said quietly. "You know that, right?" Elara's hands stilled on the snow wolf she'd been smoothing. "He's a sweet child. He'd love anyone who—" "No, he loves you." Theron's voice was firm but gentle. "As his mother. Not just someone who saved him once. You read him stories every night. You comfort his nightmares. You teach him about wolves and stars and kindness. You're his mother in every way that matters." Tears blurred Elara's vision. "I never thought I'd have this. A child to love. I thought I'd die alone in the cold, that I'd never." Her voice broke. "I thought family wasn't something people like me were allowed." "You don't have to be alone." Theron took her hand. She no longer flinched from his touch. Hadn't for weeks now. "You could have us. You could be his mother and my mate and the Luna of this pack." Officially. Completely. The offer hung between them, enormous and terrifying. What if the gift fails? The words tumbled out, all her fears rushing to the surface. What if next time I can't protect him? What if winter comes and I'm not strong enough, or I lose control, or— She looked at him desperately. What if I'm not enough? Theron cupped her face with both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Elara, you walked into a killing storm for a child you didn't know. You literally gave your life to save him. You've spent 3 months protecting this entire territory through the worst cold snap in decades. You're more than enough. But I need you to understand something." His thumbs brushed away her tears. "I'm not asking you to accept the bond because of gratitude or obligation. Not because you saved Asher, though I'll be grateful for that every day I breathe. I want you to choose us because you want us. Because you love Asher." His voice softened, became vulnerable in a way she'd never heard from the Alpha King. "Because maybe, possibly, you might love me too." Elara stared at him, this powerful man who'd defended her, protected her, given her time and space to heal. who looked at her like she was precious instead of cursed. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "I know." He pressed his forehead to hers. "But fear doesn't have to mean no. It can mean not yet. And I can wait." Across the courtyard, Asher's laughter rang out as he tackled a snowdrift. "I think." Elara's voice trembled. "I think I might already love you both. I just don't know if I'm brave enough to say yes." "You're the bravest person I know," Theron said. "And whenever you're ready, I'll be here." 2 weeks later, on an unseasonably warm spring evening, Elara climbed to the fortress walls where she knew Theron often stood watch. She found him silhouetted against the darkening sky, the northern lights beginning their dance overhead, ribbons of green and silver twisting through the stars. He turned when he heard her approach, and she saw everything in his expression: hope, fear, patience, love. "I've been thinking," she said, voice steady despite her heart hammering against her ribs. "About what you said. About choosing." Theron went very still, waiting. Elara stepped closer, needing him to see her face, to understand this wasn't obligation or gratitude speaking. 8 years ago, I was exiled for being different. They told me I was cursed, that I brought death and cold wherever I walked. And I believed them. She touched her chest, right over her heart. I spent 8 years frozen, not just from the cold, but here, inside. I thought I'd die alone and unmourned, that I didn't deserve anything else. Elara, let me finish. Please. She took a shaking breath. Then I found Asher in that storm. And for the first time in 8 years, I felt something other than cold. Purpose. Connection. The knowledge that maybe I could matter to someone, even if only for one night. Tears spilled down her cheeks. And then you found me. And you didn't see a curse. You saw a gift. You saw me, not what people said I was, but who I actually am. Theron reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. You gave me time when I expected to be cast out. You gave me space when I expected demands. You let me fall in love with your son without asking for anything in return. Her voice broke. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you too. Not because the mate bond forced it, but because of who you are. Patient when I needed patience. Kind when I expected cruelty. Strong enough to defend me, but gentle enough to let me heal. Everything I never thought I deserved. You deserve everything, Theron said roughly. I'm starting to believe that. She stepped closer, eliminating the last distance between them. So yes, I choose you. I choose Asher. I choose this family, this pack, this life. I choose to stop running from the cold and start embracing it. I want to be your mate and his mother and the Luna of these territories. You're sure? His hands came up to frame her face. Because once we do this, I'm sure. She smiled through her tears. For the first time in 8 years, I'm absolutely sure. Theron kissed her then, tender and fierce and full of promises they'd both keep. The mate bond flared between them like the aurora overhead, brilliant silver-blue light that pulsed with recognition and joy and choice freely made. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Elara laughed, a sound of pure wonder. I can feel you, she whispered. In my heart. In my soul. I've felt you since the moment I found you, Theron said. But now. He pressed his hand over his chest. Now it's complete. Above them, the northern lights danced wild and beautiful, and Elara finally understood. She wasn't Winter's curse. She was Winter's queen. And she'd chosen her kingdom. 1 month later, under the full moon of late spring, the Frostborn territories gathered for a mating ceremony unlike any in living memory. The courtyard garden where Elara and Asher had built snow sculptures had transformed. Flowers pushed through the last patches of snow, winter roses and frost lilies blooming in defiance of season. Banners of silver and ice blue hung from every wall. Representatives from all territories filled the space, their formal attire glittering in torchlight, including wolves from the Silverpine Pack, the ones who'd exiled her. Elara felt their presence like a weight, but Theron's hand in hers kept her grounded. And Asher, dressed in miniature formal robes, was vibrating with barely contained excitement. "I'm the ring-bearer," he announced to everyone within earshot. "I'm helping Mama and Dada get married." The ceremony began at moonrise. Elara wore traditional Luna robes in winter white, but the crown on her silver hair was anything but traditional, frost-touched flowers she'd created with her gift, blooms that would never wilt, forever suspended between ice and life. Beautiful. Impossible. Hers. The pack elder spoke the ancient words, but Elara barely heard them. She was focused on Theron's eyes, on the mate bond humming between them, on Asher standing between them with the rings clutched in his small hands. "Do you, Theron, Alpha King of the Frostborn territories, claim this woman as your mate and equal?" "I do. With everything I am." "Do you, Elara, bearer of Winter's embrace, accept this bond freely given?" "I do." Her voice rang clear. "I choose this. I choose him. I choose us." When Theron marked her, his teeth gentle at her throat, the ancient claiming that would bind them for life, Elara felt the mate bond settle into place like the final piece of a puzzle. Not ownership. Partnership. Equality. Choice. And then the snow began to fall. Soft, gentle flakes drifted down from a clear sky, shimmering in the moonlight like diamonds. Not a storm. A blessing. The attending wolves gasped, reaching out to catch the impossible snow on their palms. "The winter goddess approves," the elder breathed. Asher shrieked with delight, spinning with his arms out to catch snowflakes. "Mama made it snow. She made it snow for the wedding." "I didn't," Elara started, but Theron laughed and kissed her. "Maybe you did. Or maybe she did. Does it matter?" Later, as people celebrated with food and music, an older wolf approached, gray-muzzled, eyes downcast. Elara recognized him, the council leader who'd voted for her exile. "Luna Elara," he said, the title clearly difficult. We were wrong. 8 years ago, we were afraid and ignorant, and we blamed an innocent child for things beyond anyone's control. I have no right to ask, but..." He finally met her eyes. "Can you forgive us?" Elara looked at him, this man who'd helped destroy her childhood, who'd sent her into 8 years of frozen isolation. She felt Theron tense beside her, felt his wolf ready to defend her honor. But she also felt the mate bond warm and strong in her chest. Felt Asher's hand slip into hers. Felt the weight of her frostflower crown and the title she now carried. "I forgive you," she said simply. "You were afraid. But fear doesn't have to define us forever. We can choose to be better." The elder bowed deeply and retreated. Asher tugged her hand. "Mama, everyone says I have the best mama in all the territories because you can make snow anytime. Is that true?" "Well, it's absolutely true," Theron confirmed solemnly. That night, after Asher was finally asleep and the celebration had quieted, Theron and Elara stood on the fortress walls watching the last guests depart below. "From Winter Witch to Winter Queen," Theron murmured, arms around her waist. Elara leaned back against him, watching snow still falling gently in the moonlight. From curse to blessing. From frozen to finally warm. "Warm suits you." She smiled. "It really does." 15 years later, Asher stood at the edge of the northern wilderness during a winter survival training exercise, now a young man of 18, broad-shouldered and confident, every inch his father's heir. But he had his mother's ice-blue eyes and her gift for seeing worth in the overlooked. "Mama," he said, breath misting in the cold air, "tell me again about the night you saved me." The real story, not the legend version. Elara, silver hair now streaked with wisdom rather than just frost, smiled at her son. "What do you want to know?" "What you were thinking when you chose to shield me instead of saving yourself." She was quiet for a moment, remembering that endless night, the killing cold, the certainty of death. "I thought I was going to die alone and unmourned. I'd accepted that as my fate after 8 years of exile." She met his eyes. "But then I heard you crying, and I realized something. I didn't want to die as someone who'd only survived. I wanted to die as someone who'd protected. Someone who mattered. You gave me that purpose, Asher. You gave me a reason to embrace the cold instead of just endure it." "I'm glad you didn't die," he said softly. "So am I." Asher grew into the kind of leader the territories had never seen, one who valued the different, the outcast, the ones others called cursed. Under his rule, the Frostborn territories became a haven for those with unusual gifts, those who didn't fit elsewhere. He saw potential where others saw problems, gifts where they saw curses. 20 years after that conversation, winter's embrace awakened in Asher's daughter, a girl with her grandmother's silver hair and fierce heart. She used the gift to explore territories others couldn't reach, to rescue travelers caught in storms, to prove again and again that the sacred magic was meant for protection. The story of the Winter Queen became legend, told and retold until it took on the quality of myth. The woman who'd been called a curse, but became the greatest blessing. The outcast who became protector. The frost-touched girl who taught them that winter wasn't death, it was preservation, rest, and preparation for rebirth. In the Frostborn territories, children grew up hearing the tale at bedtime. They learned that being different wasn't being cursed. That the coldest hearts could thaw if given patience and love. That sometimes the greatest gifts looked like hardships until someone brave enough showed their true nature. Elara's legacy wasn't just winter's embrace, though the gift continued through her bloodline. It was the understanding that strength came not from denying who you were, but from embracing it fully. That the things that made you different might be exactly what made you necessary. On a winter evening 3 decades after her mating ceremony, Elara stood on the fortress walls with Theron, watching their granddaughter practice creating warm zones in the training yard below. Snow fell gently. It always seemed to fall when Elara was peaceful, and Theron's arm was warm around her shoulders. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. "The wandering? The solitude?" "Not even for a moment." She leaned into him. "I was never meant to be alone. I just needed to find the people brave enough to see past the frost." "We were the lucky ones," Theron said. "You saved more than just Asher that night. You saved all of us." Elara smiled, watching her granddaughter laugh as snow swirled around her in patterns of light and magic. "No, we saved each other. That's what family does." The northern lights danced overhead, and in the Frostborn territories, the Winter Queen's tale continued, a story of transformation, of choosing love over fear, of becoming exactly who you were always meant to be. From curse to blessing. From frozen to warm. From nobody to legend. The greatest magic of all.